audio muted, then you won't be in the recording at all. Welcome to the third Sustainability Seminar Series event of the academic year. I'll soon hand over to the incredible moderators and speakers for today, but I just wanted to run through some of the ground rules. So please keep your mics off when you're not speaking. It always creates lots of background noise. And if you want to ask a question, please type it in the chat or wait until the Q&A at the end of the session. This event is part of an open access interdisciplinary seminar series that aims to engage all of you with some of the biggest topics in the field of climate sustainability, and it invites seminal professional speakers to discuss subjects such as climate science, justice, sustainable agriculture, and much more. Today we're going to be talking about marketing, for example. Definitely stay tuned and sign up to the rest of the interesting seminars that are coming up this year. We'll be running them one each month. And obviously this seminar series is also linked to the KEAT Sustainability and Climate module, which is a fully co-created open access interdisciplinary module, again, covering some of the biggest topics. There's really such a big range. You can read about food, sustainable finance, things like social justice, and more technical stuff to do with climate science as well. So if you haven't enrolled yet, we'd encourage you to check it out. It's honestly one of the best modules we have here at King's, I would say. For today, I'm going to hand it over to the incredible moderator who's done all the hard work to make today actually happen, and that's King's alumni Clarice Mace, who stayed engaged as an active volunteer after graduated and actually helped us set up this module in its first year. And Clarice studied a Master's of Laws at King's and is now a French lawyer specialised in environmental law. Clarice, over to you.
Thank you very much, Rosa, and hello to everyone. I'm going to introduce the three speakers now because we're going to have a panel discussion, so not three long presentation, but short question and answer. The format would be around an hour, speaking with all three speakers, and then you have all the time to ask all your questions, so in the chat, and then we answer all of that at the end. I'm going to start with Veronica Viñas. So she is the co-director of At Risk Cities. She is a campaigner and activist working with At Risk Cities and the Bad Advertising Campaign for a reduction in outdoor advertising in public space and a tobacco-style ban on advertising that harms nature and the environment. She also has a PhD in ecological science and lives in Bristol. And along with Veronica, we have two speakers from King's College. Dr. Fatima Wang is a senior lecturer in marketing. She studies the effectiveness of marketing programs and on driving changes and the impact of frontline service provision. She wrote The 6 Dilemmas for Customer Loyalty and Sustainability, where she outlines the challenges of breaking the traditional molds of marketing. She also works with local authorities to explore how marketing can increase community engagement in climate plans, and is an academic advisor for industry players in recycling plastic. And Dr. Romas Malevicius, also a lecturer in marketing at King's. He teaches modules related to marketing and sustainability, and in his academic position, his research focuses on embedding education for sustainability in higher education. He is learning design and education for sustainable development bootcamp member and mentoring academics to incorporate sustainability in their teaching practices. So we'll hear a lot more about what is marketing, what has sustainability to do. This is going to be a debate, a friendly debate, but a debate with different perspective into it. And I'm sure you'll learn a lot more about greenwashing, but also marketing at large. So we'll start with a simple question. What is marketing? It's not just ads, but what it is.
Thank you. Maybe I'll start with that question. So what is marketing? So that's usually the first question I ask in class as well. And then you get all sorts of answers. The most common one being, we got to listen to the customer. So I thought I'd start with showing a quick evolution of marketing. If you can stop sharing for a minute, and then I can share this one just very quickly. So this is a very simple diagram on the evolution of marketing, and it will give you a good idea about, why is it that we just, think the customer is always right, in this era. So if you go back to kind of the Industrial Revolution age, this is the production era. This is where, you know, whatever gets produced gets sold. So they all only have to focus on production, essentially. But then comes, you know, come the sales era. That's when we've kind of overproduced in the generally in the society. We've overproduced. Now we got to sell, you know, all the surplus. So we got to train the salespeople. We got to have the salesmen knocking on doors to sell things. Yes. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. And so that's where the sales, you know, kind of training comes out of. Then if you can see the word marketing coming in now in 1940s onwards, and that's because customers become very savvy, right? They don't fall for these tricks anymore. You know what the salesperson says. They're quite wary about what they need, and you know they're not going to listen to the salespeople. So come the marketing era, which is we got to listen more to the customers. What do they want? You know, what makes them tick? What makes them want to buy our products? So it comes out with all this market research and the importance of having, you know, marketing as a department, and you know even within the company becomes more and more prominent. And then right now what we're in is kind of towards relation marketing and obviously social and mobile marketing era. So this is really already very focused on the customer, right? If you think about social media, everything is immediate gratification, right? TikTok, quick, make everyone happy. So a lot about this is, yes, the customer is always right. Let's listen to customer. What we've ended up doing is, you know, providing a lot of products or, you know, coming up with a lot more products than we need, really, just to satisfy every little whim that the customer has. So that's kind of an overview of what is marketing. I think Clarice, you're on mute.
Sorry. So that is the story, but where there's a problem now with marketing, where do we need to talk about it a lot? Fatima, if you want to start, and then perhaps Veronica.
You want me to start again? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. I just think that basically we've created a little bit of a monster, right? Where we think that we need to cater to what customers need. So you need to create more stuff, you know, a never-ending meeting latent needs of customers, promoting consumption without consequences, so always the next version of the iPhone, for instance. And if you ask anyone, why would you upgrade? Well, it's never because the phone is broken, it's because of something else.
Yeah, I suppose if it's okay for me to add to that, I would say going back to the question about what is marketing, it's good to think about who marketing reaches, whether that's advertising or PR, sponsorships through sports organizations or cultural institutions. Who are those messages reaching? And that is citizens, all of us, how we think. It frames our cultural narrative in many ways because we see literally thousands of adverts every single day. But it also reaches people who are decision makers, stakeholders, shareholders, people who can financially support certain sectors and industries. It's important to kind of think about that when we feel what is the problem with current marketing, because especially when we start to look at misleading marketing and greenwash, as we'll come to later, it's not just citizens who are being reached by those messages. It's people who are making really important decisions, whether that's to approve a new oil field or to deregulate plastics industries. And that is also something that's useful to think about. But to add to what Fatima said just now, I think, yeah, it's not just this idea of promoting more and more the new product, even when your last one is not broken, something that's called marketing obsolescence. So just promoting something newer because it's flashier or cooler or whatever. But also thinking about how advertising, marketing, for which we at Ad Free Cities talk a lot about advertising, how that frames our cultural narratives and us as individuals. And as individuals, how do we act in a collective as well? So if as individuals we see thousands of brand adverts every day, usually by brands that can afford to put their adverts in front of our eyes on screens or in public space, that is reframing the way we think about ourselves in a very insidious way. to think of ourselves as consumers above active citizens or people who care or are going to act in pro-ecological ways. We're more likely to act simply as a consumer to meet those existing and latent needs. So it's kind of thinking about how advertising marketing reaches us, and perhaps one of the biggest problems is at the very heart of the advertising industry now, and the heart of marketing practices is how can an industry that has existed for years to sell more products act now that we are very, very aware that our planetary boundaries have been reached and transgressed. So that, I think, I'd just add to that, and I could go on, but I'll stop there.
So also I could add now the importance of nowadays the notion of sustainability, and also influence how marketers trying to promote their products and services. And sustainability becomes one of the key vehicle or angle of the product or services they try to introduce to the consumers. And that becomes a problem. And that's why these notions of greenwashing, whitewashing, blue washing, pink washing, this becomes more and more prominent. And that's what we need to do something about it. So from my marketer's point of view, the challenge is how to make sure that we're transparent. We are sharing the true aspect and true intentions. So for me, from my point of view, at King's Business School, we're trying to teach students to be more responsible marketers, to think about what decisions they are making and trying to avoid the aspects of greenwashing. And talking about the greenwashing, Elisa, do you?
Yeah, so the word already is there, greenwashing. So before we just give you participant a definition, we'll put in the chat a word cloud to let you speak a bit about what is greenwashing for you. So you can just click on the link, and then we'll see what you all think greenwashing is. Then I share, it's just a few words about, when you hear greenwashing, what do you think about, and what are the first words that come up? And then I'm gonna share my screen to see what you will think, and then we'll give you a definition to see a bit how well or little you know about a bit about the subject. Can you hear my screen? Can you see my screen? So, hidden, claiming, yeah. See a lot of false, fake, lies, that's there, and then untrustworthy. Yeah. Yeah, so we see a lot of things about lying and fake, false, and then another one is a lot about environment, nature, imagery, claiming to be eco. And then you also seem not to like it with misleading, reputation, fraud, overstating. So yeah, we have a lot of the elements there. That's great.
I think they all agree it's not a positive thing.
Yeah. We have fossil fuel also here, but that's not all of it. But yeah, misusing green activism, that's also interesting. So you seem to already know a lot about it, but can you tell us a bit more about what is greenwashing, perhaps with some examples? Perhaps Romas, if you're gonna start.
Yes, so when it comes to greenwashing, I will share more examples when I talk about what organization could do in terms of marketing communication. But one of the definitions I have defined by Delmas and Burbano, the greenwashing as intersection of two firm behaviors, or environmental performance and positive communication about environmental performance. So this is not linked directly with the marketing, but it's also linked with overall organization behaviors. So whatever activities they are doing. And the word green is usually linked with environmental implications, but nowadays we kind of expanding the spectrum, and this could be way more other activities that organization could mislead their consumers or the other stakeholders.
Yeah, Veronica, do you have perhaps also more example about also what Ad3Cities does and how do you spot greenwashing?
Yeah, so Ad3Cities works with the Advertising Standards Authority, the UK's only advertising regulator. We report adverts we see or that are sent to us that look to be misleading in that they overstate a company's environmentally friendly practices and hide the elements of their business that are environmentally damaging. So in the last 2 years, we've had adverts by HSBC, Shell, Repsol twice, and others banned for being materially misleading to citizens. So I do have a good example, but I'm not sure whether my tech is going to let me share it. But so I just kind of read it out. But when HSBC, during COP26 in 2021 in Glasgow, a lot of companies, corporations decided to put out particularly green messaging during that time. And HSBC put out lots of adverts saying how climate change knows no borders and neither does their financing towards green activities, which we thought was probably misleading. So in one of their tweets, they said, "Trees capture carbon, make a home for nature and reduce flooding. That's why we're planting over 250,000 of them with National Trust over the coming months." And in their video, it said these trees would lock in 156,250 tons of carbon over their lifetime. And as you can imagine, there's lots of trees in the picture, a lot of nature imagery, kind of typical to false sustainability messaging. So we knew at the time that HSBC was investing billions in fossil fuel companies, which even under some of their sustainable financing was going to pipelines and rigs. So we made a graph, which I wish I could show you, because looking at HSBC's annual financed emissions, so the amount of emissions per year that they were financing through their support to fossil fuels, was above 6 trillion tons of emissions of carbon equivalent. And the emissions, compared to the emissions locked in over the lifetime of those trees, which was in the hundreds and thousands, it didn't even show up on the graph. So if we're thinking about what companies are showing in greenwash and misleading messaging, it's it's all a kind of surface level green sheen, very, very misleading, because when you look at it, it seems like that company is advertising something which surely they must be putting a lot of their business support and resource into, when actually that might be just one very small initiative that they're using to justify or distract from the fact that the majority of their business is not changing to reach net zero targets. So that's where we see advertising and marketing being extremely misleading, again, not just to citizens, but to decision makers as well. And following that up, just in June, something someone else might have seen, others might have seen, and I think we'll come to in this later, is a bunch of Shell adverts saying that they were providing cleaner energy. And the imagery showed, as you can imagine, things like electric car charging points and wind turbines and anything else you could think of if you're thinking of what stock footage would I use to show an environmentally friendly side of a fossil fuel business. And of course, that is not true, that it hides the fact that some 90% of Shell's business activities remains in fossil fuels, not just fossil fuel extraction, but fossil fuel expansion, so new fossil fuel reserves, which we know is incompatible with any chance of keeping temperatures to habitable limits. So those adverts were banned by the Advertising Standards Authority after they were reported. So yeah, those are just two examples from Ad3Cities kind of work on this, but yeah, they are multitudes and it's very, very difficult to keep them in check through regulation alone. And I'll stop there.
Just to add on what Veronica said, because it reminded me of this ad from Shell. So it's a recent one from June this year, and it got banned. So this one is about, shows Bristol, and it shows basically Obviously you can see the cleaner energy in quite big letters there. And just like Veronica said, the main problem with this was that it could mislead people into thinking that Shell is a very green company, whereas they obviously still invest in fossil fuels. So that is the main issue. I mean, we were trying to have a discussion just before this meeting whether or not it was intentional. So I think sometimes from a marketing perspective, sometimes, we are, the companies, they do things step by step. And I give them a benefit of a doubt in a way. And I think perhaps it isn't intentional type of greenwashing. But Veronica, what do you think?
Yeah, I can see people sort of commenting on this in the chat, and it's interesting to think about from my perspective. Shell, along with Exxon and other major oil companies, have known about climate change since the 60s. They know the impact that it's having, and the idea that they're trying to persuade us as individuals to shift to cleaner energy, firstly puts the onus on us rather than their incredibly damaging activities, and secondly, Shell is not changing. The week after this advert was banned, Shell released a whole load of press about how they're doubling down on oil and gas to please their shareholders. They're not reducing their impact on the environment, and to advertise themselves as a company that is sort of leading in the energy transition is misleading and also proved to be now illegal. So that would be my addition. I don't think anything Shell does in terms of green marketing is accidental at all.
They perhaps believe what they are writing, don't know what they think, depending on if that's true or not. So we saw all these ads, but what are companies already doing? What are organizations already doing to counter greenwashing allegation? And do you see a bit of a change in that, or have some companies and organizations already realized the problem it is?
Yeah, just a very quick comment. Maybe I'll pass over to the others. I think that companies know that there's an importance to sustainability, right? So it's on everyone's agenda. Now, how you deal with that agenda is the issue. So from a marketing perspective, we don't want marketing to be used as a tool to kind of over promote, right? That would be what we say greenwashing would be, like misleading, because you're over promoting your green credentials. But we do think that, promoting basically it's nice that they think about it, at least, right? Like it's nice that they're making an effort. I don't think they're quite there yet, especially with Shell. But for me personally, it's a good step forward.
Yes, just to add on that sustainability, it's becoming a quite important issue for any organization. And in a way, from my personal point of view, which is I really enjoy working with the small medium enterprises because they embedded sustainability at its core. Now, a lot of multinational corporations understand the importance, why all other stakeholders and shareholders care about sustainability or corporate social responsibility. So that's why there's increased a number of reports that every single year organizations produce. So if it's okay, then I could talk more a bit what organization could do. So I'll just share my screen and kind of go through quick development, what is happening in this arena and how marketing and sustainability can talk hand in hand, which is when we did our research, we identified there is a gap in the knowledge, how we can think when we now understand that marketing, communication, and sustainability, they kind of goes hand in hand. And there is lack of practical application, how we can do this and what organization can do this and what we can learn to this. And throughout sort of mini presentation, I will try to share some good and bad and ugly examples. And that will reflect on the things that we talk about greenwashing, but including other types of washing. Just thumbs up if you guys can see my screen. Yeah, okay, thank you. So starting with a kind of broader element of the terminologies, and starting with the corporate social responsibility, it's been since 1953, we're already trying to talk about the importance of corporate social responsibility and responsibility of the business. And therefore, elements such as stakeholder theory, Carroll's pyramid of CSR is a more systematic way of looking into organization and what activities they can do. I'm sure we heard the triple bottom line or 3 interlinked circles of sustainability, which is include environment, society, and economy. For the later development, it's starting created a new concept such as creating shared value by Potter and Kramer. It's interesting to see that Potter, who has been very active in overall in business environment, and starting, even there's a TED talk with him that's saying that business creates a problem, and now we need to think how business not being a part of the problem but part of the solution. And he's creating shared value concept where economy meets with a society. Though it's still there's a lot of discussions about the critical overview of these frameworks. Because sometimes it's very hard to measure, let's say, society impact, while economical perspective, we can have clear KPIs or key indicators that can assess the successful organization activities. Now, moving on, in the 1980s, they started with Sustainable Development Goals. So from United Nations Agenda, we have United Nations Agenda 21, then UN Global Compact is just a key few conferences that we're emphasizing the importance of the role of businesses and what they're doing towards society. And in 2000, we experienced with Millennium Development Goals, which is translated in Sustainable Development Goals. Now everyone is aware of and talking about. Majority of businesses, they're trying to align their activities with SDGs. But again, we're experiencing a bit of lack of transparency, how to measure success. And this becomes very challenging for any organization. And nowadays, the new trend that is happening is environmental social governance, ESG, which is coming more from the financial services, how businesses trying to assess their activities and looking from a ESG model. So today I want to kind of briefly talk you through our is one of the book chapter we're about to publish in digital marketing and sustainability aspects. What could be the steps important to consider and how we can address sustainability. So we introduced the Planet Framework, noticing that there is a need that step-by-step actions that marketeers but also business owners should consider when we starting with the P, prioritizing sustainability and stakeholders. So stakeholders plays an important part. Then linking all these activities with a digital marketing strategy, identifying the clear aims, aligning, A stands for aligning with the key stakeholders. So whatever campaigns, marketing campaigns we're trying to introduce, how does this align with the broader community? And we put it for no deceiving income, so that becomes one, no greenwashing, whitewashing, or any other washing elements. E is evaluation. So kind of inputting some more risk measurements that make sure that whatever we're putting out there, that's not damaging or the organization's reputation. There is no any discrimination whatsoever. And finally, taking action. It's celebrating success, but also learning from the mistake. And we're putting sort of our approach that this is very cyclical elements. And whatever organization, a small or medium enterprise, they all can learn something from this framework. And I thought, and any feedback on this also very welcome. So moving from the elements I mentioned, stakeholder diagram plays an important part. When starting at the beginning, the role of capitalism that Friedman was mentioning about the role of capitalism is to satisfy the shareholder needs. Nowadays, we're trying to look at the organization into more broader perspective. And that's what we approach Friedman's stakeholder approach, where shareholder is a part of that, but also considering the secondary type of stakeholders that directly or indirectly organization activities could get involved. One of the challenging of this is that how we measure. So imagine like big organizations such as Apple, they have hundreds and thousands of suppliers, sub-suppliers. To investigate their carbon footprint, their activities would be very challenging. But we want to emphasize the importance to address this and to make sure that we're able to incorporate different elements into our future marketing campaigns. So one of the aspects, starting with L, how we can link with digital marketing strategy. So first of all, identifying those challenges, key channels and value performance indicator. This could be built through partnerships and collaborations, and also creating that value creation with the key stakeholders. This could be done by addressing sustainable development goals and trying to map the activities and identifying the key stakeholders important to consider. Some of the businesses already incorporating society issues into as a part of their business model. So one of the organization, and if you're in London, I definitely recommend to use Unseen Tours. This is an organization that actually my students been working with them. They're part of their activities or business offering. They providing tours around London, and the employees that they implement, they faced with homelessness, and they're trying to build community and build awareness about homelessness especially in London areas. And they were very vocal about it, explaining activities that they're doing and what kind of support they're making. So this is kind of business model with a strong social impact. Oops. Another element is aligned with their stakeholders. So we talk in the marketing terms like what is your key persona or what. So moving from that, we're trying to define what is your key stakeholder that you want to communicate with, and what marketing address that in your digital marketing strategy. One of the examples when organizations are actually trying to educate consumers. You know that fashion industry is the second biggest polluter of water, and there's a lot of things happening in terms of fast fashion and trying to reduce, in order to trying to reduce the consumption of clothes. Brands such as Patagonia, 2011 in New York Times, they put this spread around it, big spread in a newspaper where they said, don't buy this jacket. So at the same time, they're trying to educate the consumers and indicate what they could do with the stuff that they already have, like reduce them or repair them, you can reuse them, or recycling. Also to, rather than throwing things away, thinking giving to the charity, which was interesting campaign. Ironically, before I give you a stage to Fatima, ironically, this campaign actually generated 40% higher profits for Patagonia. So on one hand, even though the organization stands very strong environmental and social values, so there's that gray area. It was really impactful campaign, which has contributed to more sales. Fatima, what do you want to say?
Thank you. Yeah, no, I just wanted to link this with what's going on in the chat, which is we were saying there's a lot of queries about whether focusing on the environment can be profitable or not. So I suppose the argument is, well, you know, you can build a business around it, and I'm sure everyone on this call would have heard of Patagonia and their unique kind of marketing perspective. And, you know, they're selling on this perspective, obviously, right? So I think it is up to the companies to come up with ways and innovative ways to, you know, sell this idea of sustainability, make it interesting, right? It's possible, as you can see from here. But yes, at the same time, it's hard because we have been living with this dominant social paradigm, right? This dilemma or this logic of, oh gosh, we got to make 1 million things and we got to buy 1 million things just to be happy. So that is, I have to say, is probably a very marketing-driven I don't know if we have to take responsibility for that, but yeah, that might have come from all this marketing campaigns that we've been seeing for so long.
Yeah, and I think that's, but that educational element as well kind of plays an important part when business is saying like, okay, it's not about selling the products. There are other commercials like always where introducing like a girl hashtag campaign, like a girl, where they're trying to emphasize the importance when girls go through puberty and what kind of discrimination they could experience. And there was commercial ad not linking with like product features and what it can do and unique selling point. It's more about brands social stand, what activities they want to engage. And nowadays, when talking about branding, we always say it's about the personality and what qualities, the skills they have, what characteristics you can allocate with that. So, and nowadays, that's why this plays such an important part. It's not just about the product, but actually what they're selling for and what they're standing for. So for that, it's so important to identify that. What is that? What do you mean by sustainability related messages that will be used in communication? And therefore, they need to clearly identify. That's why education for sustainability counts. We need to educate future leaders and decision makers about it to clearly understand in terms of the clarity and the approval of the various messages that we can include. Giving some other examples, so we're going beyond greenwashing. There is also concepts such as whitewashing, which is started with the film industry when famous actors misrepresenting ethnicity level. And here's one of Dove commercials that also contributes quite a stir on the social media, and that was accusing of whitewashing. Another concept that is also very vivid and popular is hushing. Basically, again, not telling the whole truth or hiding some parts of element, which could be related with Volkswagen and emissions, CO2 emission scandal. Fashion brand is also famous for kind of really missing the steps. And when you're thinking about it, this is not a small organization, especially when talking about Zara, which has millions of pounds, and also they have huge resources, and they could just miss that mark. Again, misrepresentation and that sort of discrimination also was very key feature in terms of what clothes design they incorporated, that could just miss the mark. So there's important to get that evaluation. So when you set up to that marketing campaign, so E stands for evaluating and receiving feedback, whereas a qualitative or quantitative, but thinking about there's a need of clear standards and checklists, making sure that before it goes out to the wider community. And definitely there is not one person decision. There should be a group decision and making sure that it's not impact any stakeholders. The recent example, and that's links it back to greenwashing element, when people trying to say, hey, let's do this bold marketing campaign and we'll get a lot of likes. This is one of Korea's cosmetic brands, and they just put the message, hello, I am paper bottle, which is so popular. And well, nowadays consumers are smart. They know that what we are talking about. So they cut it through and say like, hang on a second, how you call yourself paper bottle if there's plastic inside there? So, and that could be brand image damaging, and that could be definitely impact negatively on the word communication. They got a lot of attention. I'm sure it's all around the world, but on the wrong terms. The other more hidden elements when they're trying to appeal with a social cause. And this is example from Canada when dish soap use Dawn, they utilizing, especially emphasizing that they clean animals after oil spill, and use as a key messages on the promotional campaign, you know, including all these cute animals, really kind of melts as our hearts. When journalists investigating a bit deeper, they find out that actually they chemical called triclosan, which is actually harmful for aquatic life in general. So that information that they didn't disclose to the consumers, and people felt like, okay, it's been mistreated on that. Now, that's another strength from European point of view. They're trying to ban anything that links with greenwashing and improve consumer information. Anything that you wanted to say that it's fresh, that is new or environmentally friendly, you shouldn't able to use that if you don't have a clear evidence to justify that. And now even European Union understand that this becomes a major issue, especially with increased knowledge and interest in sustainability and what organizations want to talk with their consumers. Finally, letter T is to taking actions and looking at all the stakeholder feedback and investigating from qualitative and quantitative point of view related to the project or communication campaigns. I know maybe it sounds idealistic, but sometimes people just say, we need here and now, and let's push it as quick as possible, and then we see what happens. So rather than we suggesting, think about like, what is the bigger impact that this could receive and how damaging for the brand could be. Clearly contributing and stating the social, environmental, or economic considerations is important, and thinking about clear part of ongoing storytelling in the marketing communication. Not everybody's getting right, and still even taking these processes into consideration, they might experience some failures, but it's better to be honest rather than sugarcoating and come up like, if we did the wrong decision, be honest with your consumer and try to also celebrate any successes. Last example I would like to show, again, it links with the business model itself. So Mud Jeans, it's a jeans company that's based in Amsterdam. They incorporating circular economy approach where you can rent jeans instead of buying them. And if you don't want those jeans anymore, they can make it into vintage ones and you can have it, or they can recycle for you. And they invest heavily in their facilities that they want to reduce the overall carbon footprint. And in terms of recyclability, this company looks from raw materials extraction to transportation to product use and to recycling, which contributes towards life cycle analysis. The other elements, they very heavily invested in the social reporting, looking at the factories, and especially after Rana Plaza collapse, which was a huge disaster in the industrial disaster in the fashion industry. They started to be more transparent in terms of where the factories are based. Next to it, they've heavily involved in educating. So education plays part of the Mud Jeans ethos. They incorporated the course on sustainable fashion that you can access through their website. Also, they looked into how businesses could translate the message to the masses. And during COP26, they introduced this COP-ness monster, which is made of recycled jeans. And it was 6 foot long and was displayed in front of the main buildings to showcase the importance, the impact of the over-consuming fashion. So that concludes my presentation.
Yeah, thanks a lot. That shows how sustainability should be embedded in all the steps of marketing, how we should really think about it and how should company think about it. But Veronica, in your work, does that really translate into company are actually behaving, or do you see something changing? Or
yeah, good question. And it's interesting to see these examples of where companies can use marketing to sort of have clever ways to tap into our eco-consciousness. And earlier, Fatima mentioned that it's nice to see that companies are kind of including sustainability messaging in their marketing. But that's as a result of huge and growing public pressure for companies to take accountability for their impact on the environment. And it's not enough to spin that purely into marketing messages. That has to be followed up by actual changes in business practices that are harming the environment and human rights. And I look at advertising, I'm not an expert, but I don't see that there is enough change in industries. For example, aviation is a very clear example. We don't actually see that much greenwashing in aviation. Most aviation companies perhaps have dabbled in greenwashing, but usually are just promoting bargain basement flights or long distance luxury flights with no nod to sustainability messaging. And that's because they're just attempting to perpetuate this industry, to grow this industry, and to find ways around regulation. And through this normalization, you see aviation adverts everywhere. We think we're getting these mixed messages. You know, you might have one advert from Patagonia saying encouraging repair culture, but the vast majority of ultra fast fashion adverts are just selling cheap clothes on ultra fast trends. You might see one advert from one airline that says we're trying to put research into sustainable fuels. There are no sustainable ways to fly, but we still see adverts for aviation everywhere. So whilst we know that industries are not taking accountability, are not reducing their emissions or their impacts on human rights, I think we need to go beyond the question of greenwashing. Yes, stop greenwashing. Stop greenwashing at source by ending adverts and advertising and promotion and marketing and PR to industries and sectors and companies that are particularly harmful. We no longer see adverts for tobacco. You no longer go to a sports match and see a billboard promoting. You no longer see that much cigarette promotion in films, even that has reduced. And I think we need to look at these wider sort of broader solutions to the problems that we're discussing here, and something that Ad Free Cities and Badvertising are campaigning for, along with many partners in Europe, Australia, and places in the world where the frontline impacts of climate change are even worse than in the UK, are campaigning for a full end to that type of advertising. Stop advertising flights, stop advertising fossil fuel companies, stop advertising meat and dairy, and yes, fine, shift some commercial marketing practices towards more sustainable messaging. That's definitely needed. But at this point, we also need to rein in advertising's influence on polluting behaviours, stop promoting high carbon behaviour patterns. And to do that, there can only be a full ban on certain sectors, which will stop the greenwashing problem, but also stop the influence that is it's beyond time to stop that level of influence.
Yeah, I can put on that influence. Where I come from, we actually had a proposal to ban all SUV cars, all ads on SUV cars, but the government just reduced that to fossil fuel campaigns. So we don't have a lot of ads advertising fossil fuels, so it doesn't really work. But I think some countries are starting to realize that this is a problem. But we also heard about the EU initiative about green claims and greenwashing, and about ASA. So it's an authority, not a judge, who can rule that advertisements are greenwashing. So can you sum up a bit about what is already done in this legal framework, and what could be done? Perhaps if you have example from other countries, because perhaps Veronica, you can start with the ASA, what it is exactly, who can do it, and how do you use this tool?
Yeah, so the Advertising Standards Authority in the UK is our only advertising regulator, with some input from the Competition and Markets Authority. Ad Free Cities works a lot with the Advertising Standards Authority, so that's the pattern that I know well. And the regulator can act on misleading green claims, like the HSBC advert, like the Shell advert that we've been speaking about. And they can also put an end to adverts if they're socially irresponsible in regards to the environment. So if that's promoting a behaviour that's grossly prejudicial to the environment, which in their examples they choose encouraging littering. And we would argue that that should be much broader and should apply to things like taking a flight, which is one of the quickest ways that a human being can fry the planet. But the industry regulator is interesting because it is funded. Our only advertising regulator in this country is funded by industry. It also has no legal teeth, so companies that transgress by making an advert that is deemed to be misleading by the regulator have no fine and no legal recompense. And the ASA also acts mostly reactively, so they act once they've seen an advert rather than stopping adverts before they get to see us all. So in the example of the Shell advert we looked at earlier, it was banned after a full year of being out in public. So we can see that it's too slow. It has its own interests a bit too close to its heart. And again, this comes to our point again that to stop greenwashing at source, to stop the harms caused by advertising to the planet, we need a stronger situation. We need those adverts to not be permitted at all. And in the meantime, interesting thinking about marketing and what the role of this industry is, there's a big movement for advertising agencies and professionals to not work with the most polluting clients. And for a step to that, for a step towards that, to be that agencies report their advertised emissions in the same way that a bank has to report its financed emissions. So to transparently report the emissions that it is promoting or creating an uptick to by selling these kind of advertising campaigns, whether that's for a car or an airline company. So that's also a really interesting movement, and I think really important, because once an agency has to report its advertised emissions, it work with a company like Shell or like Lufthansa or whatever else we can think of. So there's these interesting kind of solutions in there, given that in our view the regulator is not effective nor timely.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think the having regulators definitely is very important. I think companies learn lessons from them. Maybe, as I always think, perhaps they don't do it intentionally. That's my argument. And that having these regulators make them learn that lesson, like, okay, you can't communicate this, like this way, because it's misleading if you're not doing the actions, or if you're over promoting your green credentials, put it that way. So like Roma says, the actions and then aligning with the stakeholders, all that have to go hand in hand. So you have to have the actions first, obviously. So I agree with all what you're saying in the chat. You do have to have the actions first, and then marketing is there to support the green actions. It's not there to kind of cover up, right? Or to say you are green when you're just starting off. So a good example is like the Innocent smoothies. When they started off with the recycled packaging, they did kind of a step by step. So they would say things like, "Oh, it isn't." I can't remember the exact figures, but maybe like it started off with 10% of this bottle is recycled plastic, and then it went up to maybe 30%, 50%. Obviously now it's 100%, so that customers can see the journey that this company is taking, and the company itself is being transparent. Or they're not saying that we're completely green from the beginning, but we are taking these small steps to becoming a greener company. And so I think in that respect, marketing is very good for them. Maybe Romas can tell us more about storytelling, because that is quite powerful as well when we are trying to communicate sustainability.
Yes. So in one of the key aspects, and this is from coming maybe from a more engineering point of view, when I discussed about how organizations could incorporate or their carbon footprint, for instance. So by, let's say, investigating their activities using life cycle assessments, which, as I mentioned during my presentation, because I think for some businesses that have already been for 50 or 100 years and they're doing the same things, to implement sustainability practices, it could be quite challenging. And sometimes we can see that it's something that they do as add-on rather than really fundamentally changing their practices. So from life cycle assessment point of view, thinking about how they can investigate their activities from the actually extracting raw materials from manufacturing process to consumer use and recyclability, what goes to the landfill, what you can take back into a production. And on each stages, you can calculate that carbon footprint element, but also investigate in that social impact. And some of the organizations already heavily investigate in trying to promote these kind of practices. Veronica, you want to say something?
Yeah, just to come back on some of that, including about innocent drinks and the kind of leading the consumer into this journey of how recyclable their bottles are. Innocent Drinks is owned by Coca-Cola, and Coca-Cola is the largest plastics producer and polluter on the planet. So it's also important to think, where do these chains of responsibility lie? Do they lie with a consumer who's trying to do the right thing and recycle? Or do they lie with Coca-Cola, who continues to churn out endless plastics pollution that ends up in areas of the world that are experiencing extreme health problems because of that, and the loss of nature and everything else that we know happens because of the continued use of throwaway plastics? Or is it on Innocent Drinks and Coca-Cola to say, okay, we will now support deposit schemes, because that is something they've lobbied aggressively against? And these are things that are easy to find out, and it's things that marketers can also find out and include in their thinking around which companies are advertised and how misleading is this advertising given the core nature of this business, and when is it time to stop making promotions for that client. In terms of the carbon footprint, a similar kind of thing comes in play, where the carbon footprint was heavily promoted by Ogilvy, who are BP's advertising agency, who decided BP needed an image change and they needed people to stop looking directly at the heart of the problem and realizing that fossil fuel companies were causing oil spills and mass pollution, and start looking at consumers and persuading them to reduce their carbon footprint. Now we're in 2023. That was back in 2005. We're in 2023, and we do all need to take responsibility for our carbon footprint and our patterns of consumption. That is definitely the case. But we also need not to be misled into thinking that the way that we act is separate from the way that corporations are acting. So that is just something to come back on against those 2 points.
I'm mindful of the time. I just have 2 quick questions for you before we go on to the chat. The first one is, what can we do as individual, perhaps joining a collective, but what is one action that we could do to combat greenwashing? You can also whitewashing or pinkwashing. What's one thing we could do tomorrow? Or
well, I mean, for me, I think people will be always attracted to marketing and advertising, etc. But as consumers, being more aware, because you all want to be green, but what's the best way? Obviously, like, let's go back to the Innocent example. They have all these small bottles as well, right? Which is very simple to carry, but the big bottle obviously is better if you really have to buy a bottle, or just go out and buy some oranges, isn't it? So there are lots of choices that consumers can make. So just be more conscious of the choices that you can make, that when you make the choice, can it be the greener option? For example, myself, I do look at the grapes and where they come from, and I try to pick the one that's the closest to the UK. If there is a UK one, I buy the UK one. If not, either I try not to buy it, or I try to, pick one that's a bit closer, not somewhere in Chile, for example. So that kind of choice, I think we can do, and it's very easy to do.
Yes, I agree with that. And I think we always say the story for students as saying we voting with our wallets, what we want to support. Definitely, rather than being passive listeners, we encourage our students or everyone we teach when we talk about it. So what we can do about it, and we all play our part in this. And I guess when we are supporting one or the other organization, we need to make sure that we do our own homework, or things that very good examples in terms of when you mentioned about Coca-Cola bought Innocent, or the same as a ethical dilemma when L'Oreal purchased Body Shop, which builds that gray area, how each organization is going to influence these activities. Sometimes we don't know these things, and consumers, when they are going there and thinking like, oh, I like this brand values, but they not really investigate more details into this. So for us consumers, be mindful. I like the Fatima's example in terms of food mileage and having shorter food mileage or using more seasonal produce elements. From the fashion point of view, I kind of really have this image in my mind, like, do you really need new clothes? Maybe you have already that you have, or things that you can purchase like secondhand and supporting the charity shops. And I think post-COVID, which gave us a bit great opportunities to think our own actions on daily basis. And now secondhand, especially in fashion industry market, is booming, that you can easily exchange your clothes. So yeah, these activities is there. I guess we can also post the link to calculate carbon footprint. Then also investigate, all things starts from you, and activities that you're trying to change by changing your diet, maybe swapping to more vegetables rather than over consuming meat, thinking about your mindfulness and health. These aspects could help, and that share those good practices with others and inspire others. So that will be my takeaway.
Yeah, I suppose from my view, firstly, the two things any individual can do to reduce their impact on the planet, or as we've been calling it, our carbon footprint, is to fly less and to eat less meat and dairy. And those are the two things that will make the most impact. I think in terms of the context of this webinar, resist consumerism. We were citizens before we were consumers. We are still citizens. We can be active in the way that we vote, in the way that we act towards each other, in the way that we act to the planet, in the way that we act to other species. And part of that can be resisting the advertising messages every day that are telling us to consume, support repair culture, preserve vegetables, whichever way you do it, in ways that bring you joy, bring you happiness and fulfillment. We're all in this together, and we can't buy our way out of this. So vote with your wallet, perhaps, but more vote with your heart. Yeah, that would be what I'd say. And I'll add into the chat if anyone's interested in trying to garner political support to put an end to the messaging that is perpetuating high carbon lifestyles, then you can write to your MP, and I'll put that link there.
Yeah, also,
and move your money. I think someone's just put in, but yeah, move your money to a green bank like Triodos.
Yeah, and also you can also write a complaint to ASA if you see or hear an ad that you don't like. Anyone can do it. So that's also something. I want to go now to the question and also the Padlet that we sent before, because we had some interesting thing that I'm going to put in the chat about how to change a bit the narrative. And we have some NGO, for example, Greenpeace with Coca-Cola, who did a mock ad to change the narrative, but using these marketing stuff. And the other one is a YouTube a LinkedIn video about how to move people, but just using these marketing archetypes and then using it for the good, sustainable messaging. How do you feel about it? Can you speak a bit more on this? Perhaps Romas, if you want to go on.
Yeah, can you please, clarify the question?
It's a bit, how do you feel, and have you seen a trend in using sustainable marketing narrative, but using it for good, for example, by NGOs or by scientists to convey this message, but using branding that we know, but using it as mock ads or some stuff?
So I think the basics of marketing communication, branding definitely could play an important part and could be played as a force for good. Have you guys seen the latest parody of oil commercial? That was really good. How they trying to saying like, while you are investing in these banks, and they supporting oil industry, and they were saying like, thank you for doing so. So it was really powerful message that been all around the world in social media. So I think even looking for more ironic point of view, but definitely can bring these core problems into the main stage. Also, the marketeers kind of utilizes in a way fear element. So, you know, you're seeing these ads with a melting polar cap or super skinny polar bears and say, okay, this is climate change is happening, that they can affect you. Also pictures of some communities, let's say in Africa, where they're starving and trying to kind of negotiate for donations, to provide more donations to the cause. So using these messages could be definitely make an impact in people's minds, and I like, as Veronica said, hearts as well, and to make that more sustainable actions and inspire others as well. So I think this goes for me hand in hand, and that's what we are teaching from marketing perspective when I teach digital marketing, and also master degree students in leading and managing sustainability, the importance of that communication. You might do good things, and we don't need to also, we share a lot of light on other organizations, but also we need to embrace those little small medium enterprises that are really saying like, we have sustainability and that's our core, but they're not communicating about this enough. They not build that awareness. So when I work with businesses or small medium enterprises, this is what all of the activities that we do is trying to map out activities that they would like to share with the world as well.
Do you want to add something, Veronica or Fatima? Or shall we move on to the question in the chat? We had one, I don't know if you have a lot to add on it. Trevor shared a link to the influence map, net zero greenwash. So I share it again in the chat because it was earlier, but there's a map with all a lot of companies with the number of web pages containing net zero terms, and then how are they or not aligned with the Paris Agreement. The idea would also be, what do you think about this net zero terms, and is greenwashing really now having all these net zero, because net zero is a bit vague, a vague term. Is it also part of greenwashing just to use these vague terms such as net zero? Do you see a lot of that? And have you seen this study, or do you have anything to say about it?
From my point of view, usually one of the challenges that marketing trying to simplify things. You know, we had Brexit, so it's simple, easy word just to explain what is cause about it. Now linked with sustainability, we have, you know, this concept as net zero. So when I hear net zero, it's never going to be zero. Unless we like really shut down and stop doing, like sitting still and not breathing and not doing anything, then maybe you can achieve that zero. But every single step, like even nowadays is a popular concept, like, okay, we don't want to meet face to face, let's go online. Like even now we're having this chat, we're already generating carbon footprint. So we need to also understand, we're using electric cars, but where the fuel's coming from, and also making lithium ion batteries for the electric cars. It's all a very dirty business, using rare earth metals. So it's great to be idealistic and say, okay, the end point is net zero, but at least we're working on one of the programs. We're trying to investigate how to make an educational program claim that is net zero, which is a little bit of skeptic point of view, but actually trying to see like how we can investigate in terms of carbon footprint from the student perspective at the university. So at least walking towards net zero, but people need to understand that, which is linked to another aspect, is offsetting. So what we use in terms of we use carbon footprint, we think about, oh, we just can, the excess, we can just offset to somebody. Now in the literature is already talking about that offsetting could be also considered as a kind of easy way out. And rather than thinking really in your own backyard, what things you can reduce, what things you can change, and not straight away thinking like offsetting is the solution of the problem, and not kind of paying attention in day-to-day activities. There's been also some organizations that taking your social impact, and you can offset that as well, which is now becomes and considers as a part of the greenwashing from organization point of view. So overall, need to be very mindful when we use this terminology. We need to clearly define what do you mean by this, what does it actually represent. And yes, we never maybe reach that zero, but at least working towards it, understand the intention. But we need to be very careful, and especially if we want to further to use these terminologies, we need to be very mindful, because people can be felt a bit very sensitive in terms of like, okay, how you can claim something that is not true. That's my point of view.
Do you want to add on that, Veronica, or we can go through? Candela asked a few questions, and the idea was, can marketing be ethical? Because even if it's green marketing, and like we saw, Romas, in your presentation about Patagonia doing an ad promoting not buying a jacket, it still had profit going on. So how can we justify marketing in this space of, even if it's green marketing, it's still there to make people buy stuff? So how can we have real sustainable marketing from a company side of view, not government, who could say recycle is recycling or stuff, but from a company point of view, how can we justify, how can we make it really sustainable?
I can try and hop in there. I think this is a huge question. It's the question at the heart of marketing. And I think we sort of touched on it right at the beginning. What is the role of marketing now that we're nearing climate and ecological collapse? If it isn't to buy more stuff, which it shouldn't be, how can it be used as an engine for change? Or can it? And do we need to completely rethink how, for example, our media is funded and our social life is influenced and our culture is influenced? And at Free Cities is what it says on the tin. We think not only do marketing practices need to change, but advertising as a global influence needs to be reined in. And yeah, I'll pass to the panel from that perhaps controversial position.
I think even Patagonia, eventually, the commercial on that ad was so successful that contributed towards increasing profit. But the message that they're trying to incorporate and include it, I think that shows that it's been seen and it's heard of. Perhaps those who brought that profit, they really need that jacket, not because they need the second one, but because they really thought that, right, I really went through all these other steps, what I can do, and just makes me think about my own actions or my own wardrobe, what clothes I have, and then I make that purchasing decision, as we saw, conversion. I think the fundamental aspect is Patagonia was trying to set up is changing the narrative in terms of how we set up businesses and what is the purpose of business should be. For many years, we've been like, okay, business is for profit organization and only profit maximization is the key aspect. Now businesses understand that what the impact they are making, and it's been more openly discussed about it. So examples of Patagonia is pushing the boundaries that really inspires perhaps the younger generation who are about to open or think about any entrepreneurial ideas, if they want to go into this business world, what activities they could do and how they can be part of the change rather than like causing more problems.
Yeah, sorry, I was listening in. I had to pop out for a minute. So my take on this is that you got to envision the world in the next few years, not now, right? Because if you think about all this, because of the online revolution, a lot of the high street stores have closed down, isn't it? So that is going to evolve. So we can imagine, for instance, in 10 years down the line, companies that only sell new clothes or new things it might collapse, right? If everyone is shifting towards more buying, reused clothing or buying less, put it that way, right? So you got to not think of the now, but the future of where the society is shifting. And I think we are still in a very slow transition, unfortunately, towards sustainability. But there is that shift. I think no one can deny it. So we got to think more forward looking, if you like. Can't say, yes, they're into profits and all that. Yes, that's because we've been training our business students, business schools have been training students to think about this, unfortunately, right? But now we're teaching them something else. And then all the way from primary school, even kindergarten, people are talking about sustainability. They're taking them to see other, recycling centers, visiting these community gardens. So I definitely believe that there is a shift going on, and that, companies that are just doing business as usual are not going to survive in the future.
Yeah, and a question that was also there is, do you see a change in company who are targeted by greenwashing cases? So ASA, or I know that in some countries it's also in courts, not in regulatory authorities, but have you seen a change in company who were subjected to such cases by NGO or individual? Do you know if that has an impact in their future campaigns, in their perhaps stakeholder and shareholder have discussed it a bit, or have you seen a change in these companies? Perhaps, Veronica, when you attacked some campaigns, and when ASA said that it was greenwashing, have you seen then any changes?
Have they learned the lesson?
Yeah, interesting. This comes back to my point on a regulator that has no teeth. We were successful in getting a Repsol advert banned in June, and just 2 weeks later we saw an advert that was basically the same and had shifted the wording away from biofuels to hydrogen. And at the time, Repsol was spending 0.1% of its annual expenditure on green hydrogen. So in that case, it seemed like the Advertising Standards Authority was flagrantly ignored. In a different case, in 2021, moving to 2022, a year later, those adverts for HSBC were banned. And a couple of months later, there was an announcement by HSBC with the greenwashing complaint as part of a huge decades of campaigning for HSBC to drop its fossil fuel clients, or to stop supporting the fossil fuel industry. There was a sort of turnaround where HSBC firstly doesn't really do greenwashing anymore, but secondly has made some policy improvements towards its financing of polluting industries. So does it work? Is it working? I think it's a mix. Yeah, I think there needs to be more.
Can I also add about the life cycle assessment, and which has to do with the carbon emissions and all that? I think as consumers, we need to stop just thinking about the purchase price, which is the cost of purchasing, right, with the price tag, but also things like the disposal cost. What is the disposal cost when you get the coffee in a coffee cup rather than bringing your own mug? what is that disposal cost? You don't really think about it. You just think, oh, I'm just buying a cup of coffee. You're not just buying a cup of coffee, right? You're buying the cup as well, which has to be thrown away, which then has to be disposed of properly. And, you know, why create that waste? So what we're trying to get students to think about in King's Business School is, you know, to be a responsible consumer as well, right? So think about not just the price that you're paying at the point of sales, but what comes after that. So if you think in a more holistic way of, you know, what is the total cost of that product, then you will realize that, okay, you know, you can make more conscious choices, I think.
So perhaps with the time, a last question in the chat from Candela. I hope I pronounced your name right. Veronica, could you tell us a bit more about regulatory bodies being largely funded by industry? This is a whole new madness of industrial complex. Just to note that it's not only in the UK, it's the same in France and in another few countries such as Australia. It's not just something particular, it's all around the world.
Yes, as far as I know, that is the case. Advertising regulators throughout Europe and in the US are funded by industry. So
I was supposed to be joining on the sustainability वो and हम भूल गए कि है ना वो था
Sorry.
3 बजे.
I don't know who's speaking. We're in the middle of the seminar, so I'm gonna mute. Go ahead, Veronica.
Yeah, they are self-funded. So that's not only, for example, companies like Tesco. As far as I understand it, it's also the outdoor advertising industry, for example. So the marketers that put marketing into public space or online space. Yeah, it is. In 2021, we released a report called Too Close for Comfort about this regulatory system. We released another one recently called Toothless, Watchdog or Lapdog, which didn't go down super well with the ASA. But I recommend reading those if that's a chance to kind of get to know a bit more about the system. And I think it is perhaps under scrutiny, the whole thing.
Do you have any more things to say or any last word for the seminar? Otherwise, I'm gonna wrap up to keep it in time. Have a last thing to say that we should mention, Fatima?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say that, you know, we're focusing on greenwashing and all that. So, but marketing has a lot of studies that is looking at how to promote more green behaviors. So hopefully maybe another seminar on that.
Yeah, we probably will have one on behavior change related to sustainability. So, yeah. So we'll post again some links in the chat after with some more resources. I'll try to perhaps sum up all the links that were shared today, because we had a really interesting chat discussion in the chat with loads of resources and stuff. So you can anytime go back to the conversation on the Teams app and to read all of this, but I will try to sum it up and give you all the links. Otherwise, I think, do you have, Veronica and Roma, do you have any things to add, or?
Just to say thank you, Clarisse, for organizing this. I think it's a very important topic to bring sustainability and marketing concepts and talk about the elements that we experience almost in on daily life. And it's a great turnout with the audience. And definitely we need to have more kind of discussions and more in-depth discussions in these topics. So there's so much to unravel. So thank you. Thank you for being this wonderful panelist. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just second everything Romas says. Thank you, Clarisse and Fatima and Romas. It's been great. Thank you for having us on.
Yes,
yeah,
and I like to just leave the audience with, you know, we need to think more, we need to have more systemic, you know, kind of holistic thinking. So let's not just pick on, you know, the tiny bits, which obviously we focus on greenwashing at the moment, but hopefully let's look at the bigger picture as well and see where the society is going.
Yeah, so thank you again for sharing all your thoughts and work, and thank you all for attending. Just a few minutes or a minute, we have a few opportunities for you to get involved as we wrap up. As we mentioned in the start of the session, make sure you're registered for the Sustainability Seminar Series to receive all future invites. The next session will be in January, and we'll focus on circular economy with a few panelists that would be really interesting. And don't forget to enroll in the KEATS Sustainability and Climate module that we have on KEATS. On KEATS, you can also gain awards upon completion. You can also subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on social media to make sure you don't miss out on other events. And we will also be publishing all the recording of the seminars. And finally, you can join the King's Climate Action Network to co-create these university climate action journey and volunteer in projects around energy, school engagement, education, supply chain, and cycling. We will share all the links in the chat. So that's all for today. Thanks again. We hope to see you soon after winter break.
And before we go, can we take a group picture?
Yeah, we can.
Part of the marketing process.
Hold on.
Wait.
No.
I was just
Thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed the chat as well. Sorry I didn't get to reply to everyone, but it was really nice discussion on the chat as well.
Okay. Then, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.